Hi, and welcome to The Regulated Mother. I'm your host, Afshan Tafler, nervous system resilience coach and mother of a hypersensitive high needs child. If you're raising a differently wired kid with PDA, autism, OCD, ADHD, or big emotional needs, this is a space for you. Here we talk about what most people don't, how it really feels, how your nervous system responds, and how to find your way back to calm, courage, and connection, even on the hardest days. This episode was created using an AI-generated discussion of one of my blog articles. I'm using this format to make my writing more accessible for those who prefer to listen rather than read. You'll find the link to the original article in the show notes. Let's dive in.
Okay, welcome everyone to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
Today we are getting into something really raw, quite relatable actually. It's a deeply personal story about the overwhelming intensity that parenting can bring. Navigating these huge emotions and looking at it all through the lens of, our nervous system.
Yeah, we're digging into a really powerful blog article that one of you shared with us. And it pulls no punches about the challenges. It's tough.
It really is.
But it also offers some potentially, I think, life-changing insights.
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission today in this deep dive is to really unpack this author's experience. We want to connect it directly to what's happening in the body, those survival responses,
Right.
and pull out those crucial nuggets of knowledge that might just shine a light on these really difficult moments for people.
Definitely. And just a quick note before we properly dive in.
Yeah.
This story does mention suicidal thoughts. It happens during a moment of intense emotional collapse for the author.
Important to flag that.
Yeah, we want to be really clear about that up front. So please, take care of yourself as you listen. If you feel you need to pause, step away for a bit, maybe reach out for support. Please do. Your well-being comes first.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into the heart of this story then.
Let's do it.
The author shares years, literally years, of parenting a child described as high needs. The source mentions PDA autistic with OCD and just an intensely sensitive nervous system. And right from the start, you get this sense of just sheer difficulty.
Oh, absolutely. The source paints such a vivid picture. It's quite stark. Relentless challenges. We're talking, nights with absolutely no sleep.
Zero sleep.
Zero sleep. The son awake past 4 a.m. days, just filled with these hours-long rages, screaming, sobbing, hitting, throwing things, even biting.
Wow.
It's a level of intensity that's, frankly, hard to grasp unless you've, lived something like it.
I can only imagine. The constant state of exhaustion, that depletion that must build up over years. The author uses this phrase, every nerve in my body was raw. Just no bandwidth left, she says, to even process her own panic or exhaustion.
Yeah, and it wasn't just isolated to the parent-child dynamic, was it?
No.
The source talks about the huge strain on the marriage, too. This feeling of, the husband and wife just surviving in their own silos.
Right, separate corners.
Yeah, not able to function as a team, just bickering probably from that sheer depletion. It sounds like the whole family unit was just pushed right to the edge.
And then comes the breaking point. There's this specific moment she recounts.
Mm-hmm.
During one of these rages, her son threw something, and it actually hit her.
Ah.
And that physical impact, it just triggered this sudden, unbearable surge of rage inside her.
Wow. The description of that moment is so visceral. Suddenly couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly. Her chest felt like it was burning, hands shaking.
That primal urge.
Yeah, that desperate primal urge to just scream. But interestingly, having felt this crushing shame after past explosions, she reacted differently this time. She actually ran.
She ran upstairs into the bedroom and just collapsed on the floor.
Collapsed.
Just whimpering, her body shaking uncontrollably, sobbing. And in that state, the words that came out were, I don't want to live anymore. I can't do this.
And the author is really, really clear in the source about what those words meant.
Yeah, this is crucial.
It wasn't a plan. It wasn't, a genuine wish for her life to end. It was her nervous system hitting a point where it just couldn't see any way out.
No escape hatch.
No escape from the overwhelming pain, the fear, the relentless pressure. It was her body, essentially, finally giving out, going into a state of collapse, of shutdown.
She described just being curled up on the floor, totally unresponsive, didn't want comfort, just wanted it all to stop, to kind of cease existing in that unbearable moment.
And then in that incredibly vulnerable state, her son appeared in the doorway.
Oh, gosh.
Silent, frozen, with this look of fear on his face.
Oh, that image.
Yeah.
It just, it stops you right there.
She says it haunted her. That painful realization just hitting her so hard in that moment. This is trauma for my son, witnessing his parent like this.
And she couldn't protect him.
She couldn't protect him because she was completely submerged in her own traumatic state. There was nothing left.
Looking back now, though, with this understanding she's gained, she sees it so clearly.
Right.
At the time, it just felt confusing, terrifying, like something was fundamentally wrong with her.
Mm-hmm.
But now she gets it. Her nervous system had simply gone into this profound survival mode.
And that really brings us neatly to the key nervous system perspective that the article offers.
Yeah.
So facing years of this intense, inescapable stress, the author's system didn't just go into fight or flight. It primarily defaulted to a state of freeze, but a subtle, pervasive kind of freeze.
Subtle freeze. Okay, what does that actually mean? Because you usually picture freeze as, completely immobile, stock still.
Right. We think of the deer in headlights thing, but the source describes this freeze happening more internally. It was like an inability to fully feel her body, a suppression of her fear, her rage, her grief. Her body just became tight, tense, sort of emotionally flattened as a constant state of being.
So it wasn't necessarily about looking freezing on the outside, but more about being disconnected internally from her own physical and emotional landscape.
Exactly that. Every time she felt terrified by her son's behavior, or felt that rage building up inside, or had the urge to scream or run or collapse, her system's protective default was this internal locking down.
And why? What was the reason behind the freeze response kicking in like that?
Well, the source explains she didn't feel safe enough to actually feel those huge emotions or act on those survival urges. There was this deep-seated fear, apparently, of what would happen if she did let something out, if she wasn't in control.
Okay, which then explains why, on the occasion she couldn't hold it in anymore, it came out as that explosion of rage.
Precisely. And then crucially, that explosion was immediately followed by this wave of overwhelming shame, which just made her try even harder next time to be calm, to regain control, to push it all down again.
And the really critical insight from the source here is that this constant effort, this trying to be calm and controlled, that wasn't actually true regulation, was it?
No, not according to this perspective. That was regulation by suppression, by locking down the system. It wasn't regulation by actually returning to a state of genuine safety and connection within herself.
Okay. This is where Peter Levine's framework from somatic experiencing.
Yeah, that's a body-based approach to trauma healing.
Right. It becomes incredibly helpful for understanding what the author was going through.
It really does. Levine's core idea is that trauma often happens when one of these survival responses, fight, flight, or freeze, gets kind of stuck. It gets activated but can't complete its natural cycle in the body.
And the source points to a very specific trapped loop that can happen. It's when that fight energy, the rage, is followed by fear, and then it gets suppressed through immobility, through freeze or shutdown.
Exactly. It's often called the fear immobility rage loop.
Right.
Let's quickly trace the steps as the source lays them out.
Okay.
So first, rage, fight. The nervous system mobilizes. There's this huge surge of survival energy flooding the body. You get a powerful urge to act, to protect yourself, maybe lash out, or just escape a situation that feels completely intolerable.
Yeah, you can absolutely feel that energy building in the author's descriptions of those endless, difficult days.
Totally. But then that powerful, sometimes scary energy triggers step 2, fear. Fear of the rage itself, that thought, if I let this out, I'll hurt someone or I'll lose control completely. Fear of the consequences, fear of being judged as too much.
Which, in her specific situation with her child, that makes perfect sense. The stakes felt incredibly high.
Exactly right. And this overwhelming fear then leads directly to step 3, freeze shutdown. The system basically slams on the brakes. It has to contain all that terrifying, intense energy somehow. And this is where you get that state of feeling numb, detached, collapsed, just utterly fatigued. Okay. The collapse moment on the floor she described. That feeling of wanting everything to just stop.
That's it precisely. And then this state of immobility, this shutdown, very often triggers step 4, shame. This deep self-judgment just washes over you. What is wrong with me? Why can't I handle this? Shame for feeling the rage, shame for collapsing, shame for not being the parent you desperately want to be.
And that shame just acts like pouring gasoline back on the fire, doesn't it? It reignites more rage.
That's the insidious nature of the loop. The shame fuels more rage. Rage at the situation, rage at yourself, rage at feeling so profoundly stuck. And that rage, of course, leads back to fear, which leads back to freeze. And the cycle just keeps reinforcing itself, locking the system tighter and tighter.
That eliminates so much of her description of feeling utterly trapped, being afraid of her own rage, afraid of collapsing, even being afraid of the numb, frozen state itself.
Yes. That's the absolute key insight from the source here. It's the fear of the response itself that keeps that trauma loop solidified in the body and the nervous system. And the cumulative toll she describes, it's just devastating. Losing access to any joy or pleasure or perspective, experiencing darker thoughts, even that suicidal ideation she mentioned.
The body just living in this chronic state, kind of caught between two extremes. Hypervigilance that wired but tired, constantly bracing feeling.
Yeah, always on edge.
Always on edge. And then complete collapse, just kind of fading away inside. So, okay, we've understood the trap, this loop. The next crucial question the source tackles is, all right, how do you actually get out of it?
Yeah, the million-dollar question.
Right. And the turning point described, it wasn't about willpower or forcing yourself to snap out of it or just trying to think positively.
It sounds like it was much more subtle than that, more embodied.
Very much so. It was really about learning to meet these powerful survival responses, especially the freeze state, but without adding that extra layer of fear on top. Meeting the freeze with compassion.
Meeting the freeze with compassion. Okay, that feels really counterintuitive, though. Your instinct is to fight the uncomfortable feeling and make it go away.
It absolutely is counterintuitive. We want to escape discomfort. But the specific practice detailed in the source is about gently, slowly thawing that frozen state from the inside out.
How? What does that look like practically?
It involves pausing, first of all, just pausing, and then bringing gentle attention to the part of the body that feels frozen or numb for the author. She mentions often her legs or her chest felt that way.
Okay, so just noticing it?
Noticing it and then softly naming it, almost like whispering internally to that part of you. This is my freeze. This is how my body protected me.
Acknowledging its function.
Exactly. And then maybe placing a hand gently on that area, breathing slowly, and speaking directly to that frozen sensation, maybe whispering, "It's okay, I'm here with you now. You don't have to go away right this second."
Wow. So it's like by acknowledging it, by giving it that space and compassion, you're actually giving it permission to eventually shift.
Yeah.
Without forcing it.
That's precisely the effect described. This practice, done consistently, helped to uncouple the fear from the immobility. It started to make the freeze itself feel less threatening, which paradoxically is what creates the internal space needed for maybe some subtle movement to return, some softness, maybe even tears to finally flow. It's about creating a sense of safety within the survival state itself rather than fighting it.
That makes a lot of sense for the freeze, for the shutdown.
Yeah.
But what about the other really intense energy, the rage? That fight energy still needs somewhere to go, doesn't it? You can't just ignore that.
Oh, it absolutely does. You're right. The source really emphasizes the necessity of finding ways to let that powerful rage energy move through the body safely without causing harm to anyone, including yourself, but also without just bottling it back up again, which fuels the cycle.
Okay, so how? What did the source suggest for that? Is this where Peter Levine's VOO sound comes in?
Yes, exactly. The VOO sound. Have you heard of this?
I think so. Vaguely. Remind me.
It's basically a long, deep exhale, making the sound "boo." You repeat it several times. The idea, which draws on polyvagal theory that Levine incorporates, is that the deep vibration created in the chest and the belly helps to gently vibrate and release some of that pent-up, trapped fight energy.
Interesting, like literally vibrating it out.
Kind of, yeah. And shaking, too, right? Like you sometimes see animals do after a scare or a chase.
Oh, yeah, they shake it off.
Exactly. The source mentions shaking out the arms, the legs, the whole spine as a complementary practice. These aren't presented as ways to, like, vent anger at someone.
Right, it's not about yelling or blaming.
No. It's about how the body can physiologically complete the fight response, discharging the mobilized energy out of the system in a physical way, rather than letting it curdle into shame or explode outwardly in harmful ways.
And what was the result for the author when she started using these kinds of practices?
She describes feeling, quote, a bit more space, a bit less shame, a bit more herself. Each time she was able to practice meeting these intense states, the freeze, the rage, with this kind of awareness, and allowing the energy to actually move through. Slowly, incrementally.
This story and these insights, they feel so much bigger than just one person's incredibly difficult experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the author notes that too, right? She says this pattern is precisely what she sees in so many mothers she now works with.
Yes, she does. She identifies, broadly, 2 common ways this nervous system loop manifests. Some people cycle very much like she did, constantly trying to hold it all together.
White-knuckling it.
Yeah, white-knuckling it, until they inevitably hit a breaking point. An explosion of rage, maybe intense sobbing, followed by that wave of shame, and then retreating into an even deeper freeze or shutdown afterwards.
Okay, and then the others.
Others tend to live more predominantly in that state of shutdown or freeze. They might seem outwardly calm, but inside they're frozen, maybe dissociated, feeling burned out, struggling to even access or connect with their own emotions, let alone joy or vitality.
But the core insight here, from the source, is that both of those patterns, though they look different on the surface, are really just different expressions of the same underlying nervous system trap.
That's the crucial point.
Yeah.
And therefore, what these individuals need, what we might need when we're caught there, isn't more self-control or more willpower or just trying harder to suppress our feelings. The source is crystal clear. What's needed is nervous system safety.
Safety. And permission, it sounds like. Permission to actually feel the rage, feel the freeze, feel the overwhelm. But this time, with compassion and without the terror that those states mean we're fundamentally flawed or broken.
Mm-hmm. Reconnecting with that fundamental reframing we talked about is so key here. Rage isn't a moral failing. It's survival energy mobilizing to protect you. Freeze isn't weakness. It's the body's ancient, intelligent attempt at protection when fight or flight don't feel like viable options.
And collapse.
Collapse isn't giving up. It's the body's way of signaling it has reached its absolute physiological edge. It has to stop.
And just realizing that these are states the nervous system moves into. They aren't who you are. Fundamentally, that's what starts to dismantle the fear around them, right?
Exactly. And that brings us back to that powerful Peter Levine quote shared in the source. When the fear is uncoupled from immobility, the trauma loses its grip and equilibrium is restored. It points towards the possibility of hope, even when you feel completely stuck in that freeze.
Wow. This deep dive, it really offers such a powerful and potentially healing reframe. The message is, you are not broken.
Not at all.
Your nervous system isn't your enemy. It's this incredibly complex system that has been trying desperately in its own way to protect you in circumstances that felt overwhelming, maybe even impossible.
Mm-hmm. And the source points towards a path forward that isn't about fighting yourself or overriding your internal experience. It's about meeting these immense challenges with nervous system wisdom, with profound self-compassion, and with slow, gentle, embodied healing practices.
And that critical first step isn't necessarily about fixing anything externally right away or even forcing an internal change. It's often just about bringing a gentle awareness, a curiosity to what is happening inside you, acknowledging it without judgment.
Recognizing that those overwhelming responses you might have experienced, those moments where you hit the wall or shut down or felt that explosive rage, they aren't signs that you failed.
Yeah.
They are powerful physiological signs of a body that has been trying its absolute best to keep you safe under immense pressure.
The author's final wish in the piece really resonates, I think, and feels like the true takeaway here. She writes, "May this knowing be a soft place to land for you. May it loosen something inside you that has felt stuck for a long time. May it be the beginning of returning to yourself."
That's a beautiful and, I think, really necessary message. Thank you for joining us today for this important deep dive.
It really was. And maybe as you finish listening today, you could sit with this thought for just a moment. Consider the idea that even your most overwhelming, perhaps most painful, emotional, and physical responses, that moment of hitting the absolute limit, of shutting down completely, of feeling that terrifying rage, might actually be your body's ancient protective intelligence at work trying to keep you safe. What does it feel like, even just for a second, to consider that your system wasn't failing you, but was actually trying to protect you in the only ways it knew how in that moment? Something to reflect on.
Thanks so much for listening to The Regulated Mother. If this episode helped you feel a little more seen, grounded, or hopeful, I'd love for you to share it with another mom who might need it too. And if you want more nervous system tools and support, head to my website, illuminateyou.ca, to grab my free ebook and video series. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. You're doing brave and meaningful work.